Hello everyone, Hobbyist here, and I gotta say, when it comes to anime and manga, I've been following JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for quite some time now. In fact, when I finished Golden Wind for the anime, that is when I truly decided that I needed to go and read the manga, just because of the very different art style and the very different feel to it. So, I continued reading, I got all the way to the end of Stone Ocean, which had some major changes, and then I finally made my way to Steel Ball Run. Not gonna lie, Steel Ball Run is pretty awesome, especially considering the fact that, spoilers for those of you who haven't seen or read Stone Ocean, the continuity of the previous JoJo's gets completely eradicated due to Pucci being able to create Made in Heaven, execute Dio's Heaven plan, and ends the Joestar lineage from Jolene backwards. So this is kind of a universe reset on the continuity of JoJo's, and Johnny Joestar is technically Jonathan, but just in an alternate reality. Anyway, that's beyond the point. So Steel Ball Run, concept of it just being a race, plays into that themes very well. Araki's art style, with it being the first time in a while since I've read anything JoJo related, just shines true in this. You can really tell inside of Steel Ball Run that Araki isn't very much so tied down to his previous continuity. He just kind of goes wild with it. I will say, the very beginning of Steel Ball Run, there are a lot of elements in its grounded nature that remind me of Phantom Blood, because for a while, you really don't see any stands. It's not like with in the past where we had with Stardust Crusaders when stands would be there, with Diamond is Unbreakable already having stands, with Golden Wind, Stone Ocean, so on and so forth. It takes a very grounded beginning. It's definitely something that's very interesting. I gotta be honest, Johnny Joestar is probably one of my favorite JoJo's. Probably top three if you ask me. And because he's very different from Jonathan in previous continuities, I think that Rocky's ability to write better characters is really shown in this. We learn that Johnny Joestar, his whole family owns a ranch. They've been in the racing business for so long. But that Johnny Joestar eventually gets disowned after his brother gets killed in a racing accident. In fact, the boots that Johnny wears are his brother's boots. So Johnny Joestar's dad ends up disowning him because he's just grieving too much. And how Johnny Joestar is just this guy who rises up in the ranks and becomes this all famous racer to where everybody loves him, the women love him, he gets rich and all that sort of thing. But then eventually an incident occurs to where he gets shot and paralyzed. And then just seeing Johnny struggle with the fact that he has a disability, in that he's deemed unable to ride anymore, is already a motivating enough backstory in of itself, excluding any other concepts that are inside of Steel Ball Run. Just being able to see all of that and knowing that this is the type of Joestar that we're having. Because we haven't had anything really tragic happen to a Joestar to where they're trying to rise up in the ranks. I mean, you have similar-esque qualities of achieving a dream to win a race or something like that with characters like Giorno, who had his dream of taking over the mafia. But it's a very different type of setting. Characters that we knew in the past have all been changed, and all that sort of thing. So it has a very grounded start. Then by the time we get to the race, and then we meet Gyro Zeppeli. Now I gotta admit, Gyro, when you first meet him, he's a very sleazy character. Like, this guy isn't very likable at all. It's a very different way. There's elements to him that remind me of Caesar back in Battle Tendency. There's elements that remind me of William in Phantom Blood. I mean, of course, later on we learn that he is Caesar in this timeline. But when we first meet Gyro, you just can't help but not really like him, because he's just this guy who does whatever he wants for the sake of money, and he's not very likable. But over the course of Steel Ball Run, we just get to see this journey to where it becomes about more than just winning the race and winning the prize money in order to turn your life around. And how it turns into this quest to finding the Holy Corpse, for which those of you, obviously enough, Holy Corpse is Jesus Christ. And then we go through this whole expedition with these two characters. And the revamped version of Dio and Diego Brando, he's definitely way more sympathetic in the reason that he races and the reason that he exists. He doesn't play as much of a role early on as we think we would. There are elements of it, like I said, that kind of remind you of Phantom Blood, and there's elements that remind you of other parts. But then by the time when stands are eventually introduced, it's been a little while since a lot of time's passed since I read Steel Ball Run for me, in comparison to hopping to other animes and stuff like that. But the stands, Rocky just nails it with stands. I gotta be honest with you. Just the way that he's been able to evolve and transform stands to where, to be honest, you're never gonna get a stand that looks alike. He's not lazy like that. Every single stand is so distinct in the way that they look, in the way that they operate. In fact, honestly, my favorite stand and concept inside of Steel Ball Run has to be Civil War. And just the whole concept of taking all of this guilt and all of this baggage that he has, being able to trap somebody else with his baggage on top of any of the baggage that that person already has, was just a very interesting concept and something that was very creative on Araki's part. And then there were other stands like the girl with the divine tree and how you had to exchange objects and use up all the objects that you are given, otherwise you'll be turned into fruit for the tree, was something that was very cool. It was very creative. Or the guy with the stand that could reverse time for 10 seconds and be able to try to change his outcome. I'm telling you, Araki's just going crazy with this, and the way that the stands look, and the way that the stands operate. And then it gets even better, because we get this awesome development with Gyro and Johnny. We get awesome stands like Civil War. Then we get to Funny Valentine. Oh my goodness. Funny Valentine, for me, is probably only underneath Dio and Pucci for me when it comes to ranking JoJo villains. He is fantastic as a villain inside this park. His whole philosophy on the first napkin and being the first person to act in order to set the example for everyone else around you to follow. He's just this captivating figure that just wants to pull you in, that you want to root for. He's like a politician. He literally just influences me as a reader to kind of want to like this guy, to kind of want to see him win. Even though we can see in between the cracks of just some of the awful things that he does. Like when he forces Lucy to transform back in, well, a very sexual way. You just see that he's just a sleazy guy, that he's not likable, but just because of his charisma and the way that his philosophy operates, just makes him a very interesting character to read about. Not even excluding the fact that D4C is ridiculously powerful. Just the ability to hop into different universes, pull your mirror self out. It can literally be hopping into different universes between any two surfaces, being so concrete to the point to where it could literally be in between two raindrops or in between two shards of glass that broke. It's honestly just ridiculous with how powerful that D4C is. And then going past Funny Valentine is something else that I noticed, that they kind of went back to the roots of Phantom Blood in the aspect that there's fewer main characters. The problem that I had more so on the anime side than with the manga, with JoJo Diamond is Unbreakable, is that I felt that there was just way too many characters. Now, obviously, Diamond is Unbreakable was literally the part right after stands were introduced, so it made sense that Araki would want to go all out with showing the various kinds of stands and abilities to where they weren't just simple one and done abilities or one and done looks, that we could see all these various stands inside of Morio, and that it was more so a stand showcase. But with Steel Ball Run, stands are just kind of natural at this point. And the fact that Araki can just constantly reinvent stands in the way that they look. And sure, sometimes you might get a stand or two that has similar abilities, but I can guarantee that they don't look the same. That's just honestly what the best part is. And then when you get to the end of Steel Ball Run, more specifically when Funny Valentine evolves D4C by using the Holy Corpse and becomes D4C Love Train, honestly, that's just when things get ridiculous. Like, D4C already had the ability to hop universes in different dimensions and stuff. But now he has the ability to redirect misfortune anywhere. It's kind of a more finite control over his ability to hop in between universes. And the fact that Gyro lasts as long as he did, because spoilers, Gyro dies at the end. But to be honest, if you've been reading JoJo long enough, you'll kind of see this coming. Every Zeppeli ever dies in order to help their JoJo. Like, it's literally every single one. But it was more surprising on how literally Gyro lasted all the way to about the very end before he actually died. Because, if I'm being entirely honest, the other two Caesars of the past continuity lasted way less time than he did. William died just right after the Tarkus fight. Caesar dies right after confronting Wamu, and there was so much more events that were happening in between. But the fact that Gyro lasts all the way up until Funny Valentine gets D4C Love Train, that's honestly just kudos in of itself. The interesting angle that they go with it, to where instead of just killing off a Zeppeli, the Zeppeli gives their JoJo the power, and then the JoJo immediately goes to defeat the villain. They take a different angle with it. Instead of that, it's Funny Valentine now convincing Johnny to spare Funny Valentine in order to pull Gyro from a different universe back into this current universe in order to be able to have Gyro again. Even if it wasn't the same Gyro, it was better than him being dead. And it's a very interesting concept because you could see the conflict and see the anguish within Johnny. But going back to Johnny Joestar, the fact that his stand evolves with his character development, I honestly think it's better than Koichi's Echo's evolution. Just because Koichi's just felt more like a circumstance. Or with Pucci, it was more so Pucci executing the Heavens Plan. But with Tusk being this useless stand to evolving to the infinite rotation that he becomes when he transforms from Tusk Act 3 to Tusk Act 4, easily makes him one of the strongest stands in JoJo. Or better yet, one of the strongest stands that a JoJo has. Because obviously Golden Experience Requiem is the strongest stand out of the JoJo's. Like, his powers are literally busted. And that we know that Star Platinum is the physically strongest stand in JoJo. But with the infinite mass rotation and the fact that Funny Valentine gets beaten earlier than what we think he does, is honestly something that is impressive in of itself. And then how we get the good old classic Dio versus JoJo, but with Dio being pulled from an alternate world, and the fact that he has a stand that it is the world. But the big thing is that the world within the realms of Steel Ball Run is a very different stand from Dio that had the world in Stardust Crusaders. Because, one, the world can stop time for way less time than what Dio and Stardust Crusaders could. And the fact that we could see it in the way that it was presented, and the way that he fights, and how Diego uses more knives, and how the world inside of Steel Ball Run is a lot more nimble. He's a lot smaller in comparison to the very muscular Stardust Crusaders, the world. And how JoJo didn't even actually end up winning the Steel Ball Run race. It was actually Dio. Well, Diego technically, but we all know it's Dio. It says it right on his hat. It was just a fun ride. It was a fun roller coaster to be on, going through this journey, and how it was one of the mangas for the first time in a long time. I think that part 7 specifically is definitely one of the best parts in JoJo period. From a manga standpoint, it's the top of my list, with Stone Ocean, primarily the ending of Stone Ocean, following up right behind it. And then, of course, there was the end of Stardust Crusaders, and then the entirety of Golden Wind as a whole. And this was just a fun read. Right now, I've gotten so invested in JoJo to the point to where right now I'm reading JoJolion and just going through the identity crisis that is Gappy, and just learning of the wonderful things that are happening with Josuke, with Soft and Wet, with King Nut Call, so on and so forth. But Steel Ball Run is absolutely fantastic. I don't care what anybody says.